How is everyone? It's good to see you. Thanks for being here today. How about some good news? Want good news? Good news is Phil Weiss, my friend, is celebrating 2 years cancer-free. How awesome is that? My morning has been made of such good news. Hey, it's great to see you. Those of you who may just be joining us today, last week we started a new series of messages entitled Orange. And let me take just a quick minute or two and explain how in the world we got that title. So what we're talking about is we're talking about the family. We're talking about the family. And if you think of the family as a place of love, where moms and dads and husbands and wives and children receive the kind of compassion and care and comfort and encouragement and affirmation and support that all of us need to thrive, then we think of the home as a place of love. We use the image of a heart and the color red. We're also talking about the church. The church is to be the light of the world. Jesus asked us to be an influence in the society in which we live. Influence for all that is good and right and proper. And so as the light of the world, we use the image of a light bulb and the color of yellow. And what we're talking about is bringing both the family and the church together in a partnership. And when you unite red with yellow, you get orange. Does that make sense? So in this series, we're talking about the fact that together, a family and a church, we can do more if we cooperate with one another, particularly as it relates to the influence that we all have on the children in our lives. So this series is about a partnership between the home and the church for nurturing the faith of our children. And why is this important? Is because time is of an essence. I was sharing with you last week that we have 936 weeks from the time that your child is born to the time that they turn 18 years old. And as a father of a 23-year-old and an 18-year-old, I will tell you that time goes very, very quickly. And we have 936 weeks to be an influence in the lives of our children, to teach them the kinds of things that will serve them for the rest of their life, because much of what they learn between the ages of 0 and 18 become those formative patterns and thoughts and habits of life that they will take with them into their entire life. And that really ought to create in us a sense of urgency. Even if your child is just a few months old, time is of an essence. When you're aware of how much time you have left, you do more with the time that you have now. Does that make sense? So just a real quick highlight of the couple of things that we featured or talked about last week that I want to just remind us of again. The first one is this, that God ordained and empowered parents to be the primary influence in the spiritual lives of their children. Now that's very important that we understand that God ordained and empowered parents to be the primary influence in the life of your children, not the church. The church was ordained to have a role, to be of help to you as parents, but for a parent to simply pass their children off to the church and say, you teach them about God, you teach them about Jesus, you teach them about the Bible, you teach them about faith, we're not setting our children up for success, because the church will never have the amount of influence in the life of your children that you will as moms and dads. So we must remember that God ordained parents to be the primary influence in the lives of the children. And we're saying to you as parents, we're saying to you as a church, we'd love to be of help. We also saw this last week. Kids need parents who will help them nurture a relationship with God. You are the most formative influences in their life. And they need your help. They need your help to be able to understand these essential practices and understanding or truths about faith in order to learn them. And they're going to learn that from you. And then the second thing is that we're discovering is a lot of parents don't know how to do that. They don't feel comfortable in that role. They don't know enough about their own faith to be able to feel confident in passing it off to their children. So parents need churches that will help them to be spiritual leaders in their home. And that's what this is all about. That's why we say here, we are an Orange Church. The church partnering with families to help invest in the spiritual health and well-being of our children for the rest of their life. Does that make sense? All right, so today I want to pick up the series. Last week I ran a flag up the pole and I said I will talk this week on the topic of how to have a happy home. Anybody interested? All right, as soon as I run that flag up the pole and say, well, today we're going to talk about how to have a happy home, I sort of gulp, like, wow, what did I just set myself up for? Because here's the deal. I want to talk to you today about how to have a happy home, but I'm a little nervous about some of your expectations that somehow I'm going to come up onto this platform today and I'm going to give you, like the 3 keys or the 5 secrets or the 4 things that you must do in order to have a happy home. And I'm not prepared to do that because I'm not going to lie to you and I'm not going to mislead you and I'm certainly not going to fill your heads with a lot of plastic platitudes that really don't work in the long run. But today I do want to talk with you about how to have a happy home from a much different perspective than maybe perhaps you were anticipating. But I think if you'll stick with me and you'll give me the opportunity, we'll be able to talk about how to have a happy home in a way that I think will in fact be helpful. You guys game? So I want to begin with taking a look at what I believe is the single greatest passage in all of the Bible that answers the question how to have a happy home. Would you be interested in it? Like there is no other passage in Scripture that I am more confident teaches us everything that we need to understand about how to have a happy life and certainly a happy home. You interested? Okay, before I show it to you, I have to ask you, are you willing to be stretched a little? Are you willing to maybe think outside of some boxes? Are you willing to be made to have to think a little bit? Are you willing? All right, here's the passage. Single greatest passage in all of the Bible about how to have a happy home. It's found in the book of Proverbs. And the writer says this, I went past the field of a sluggard, a lazy person, past the vineyard of someone who had no sense, so an ignorant person. Thorns had come up everywhere. The ground was covered with weeds. And the stone wall that was around the vineyard, it was in ruins. And I applied my heart to what I observed, and I learned a lesson. I learned a lesson from what I saw. That's very important. I learned a lesson from what I saw, and here was the lesson. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, a little twiddling of the thumbs, a little wasting time, and poverty will come on you. Poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. There it is. The single most important passage in all of the Bible about how to have a happy home. And right now, some of you are looking at me like, all right, seriously? All right, so let's take a few lessons that we learned from the passage. Ready? Here's one. A healthy garden doesn't just happen, but an unhealthy one does. Remember? The writer of the Proverbs is saying, I looked at a situation, I observed some things, and I learned some lessons. So here's some lessons. A healthy garden doesn't just happen, but an unhealthy one does. The gentleman who was the gardener was sitting back, relaxing, taking his good old time doing nothing. And what he got was a garden full of weeds. It was overgrown. Second lesson, you only get a healthy garden if you do the hard work of gardening. It doesn't just happen. You have to do the hard work. And then the third lesson is this. A lazy gardener always wakes up hungry. A lazy gardener always wakes up and realizes, I don't have anything growing in my garden. Now you're sitting there saying, I still don't get it. I'm with you. We're not here to talk about gardening, are we? We're here to talk about how to have a happy home. Well, the lessons from the passage all apply. Remember, it's a proverb that applies to all of life. The truth of the matter is, a happy home doesn't just happen, but an unhealthy or an unhappy home does. If left to its devices, a home will be unhappy unless somebody does something about it. You only get a happy home if you do the hard work of those things that it takes for your home to be happy. And parents who are apathetic, unengaged, uninvolved, lackadaisical about the hard work that needs to take place in order for happiness to thrive in a home, parents who are lazy about the role of parenting and creating a happy home, they're always going to wake up starving for happiness because it doesn't just happen. Does that make sense? So today I want to talk about some of the hard work that it takes to have a happy home. And I want to cover 3 topics today, and I have only so much time. I want to talk about the single most important thing that we have to understand about happiness. Then I want to talk about the 4 essential building blocks required to have a happy home. And then I want to end with 4 essential practices or priorities that all of us must honor if we hope to have a happy home. Okay, so I'm going to have to move kind of quickly, but I want to talk about the single most important truth everybody needs to know about happiness. If we're going to talk about how to have a happy home, it's hard to say very quickly, how to have a happy home, we have to figure out something about happiness. Now, we generally work from an agreed definition of what happiness is. Most of us have some sort of an idea of what happiness is. But if we don't understand how happiness works, we will always be frustrated, we will always be disappointed, we will always be discontent, and we'll never know the kind of happiness that our heart desires. So let me ask you a couple questions. How many of you in the room, raise of hands, how many of you would like to be happy? Okay, looks like 100% participation. Those of you who didn't raise your hand, I'd love to meet with you after the service because we've got things to talk about, all right? But let me ask a couple more questions, and I ask for your participation. How many of you would like to be more fit? You know, lose a few pounds, have more vitality, energy for life, okay? That looked like a lot of you, right? How many of you would like to be successful, more successful, all right? Now, whatever it is that you give yourself to, how many of you like to be? Next one. How many of you like to be more wealthy? I'm not talking about sick rich. I'm just talking about you'd like to have more means. Be able to provide better for your family, do some things you've always wanted to do. And how many of you would like greater happiness in your life? Okay. Here's the deal. What we have to understand about every one of these things is how frustrating it would be if I said to you, well, go be fit. Go on, go be successful. Go be wealthy. Just go on, go be happy. How frustrating would that be? You know why? Because none of these things are anything that you do. You don't do these things. All of these are byproducts. All of these are the result of something. All of these are the return on some kind of an investment. You can't just go be fit What we'd have to do is we'd have to sit down, we'd have to talk about like how fitness works. And we'd have to take a look at your life, and we'd have to talk about some of the things that you're eating or not eating. And we'd have to talk about like exercise and activity and heart rate and perspiration and all these things that you'd have to do certain things a certain way over a certain amount of time, and then you will enjoy fitness. The same with success. We'd have to talk about what are some of the essential practices and priorities to greater success. And for you, it might be better time management or better project management or an addition of some skills or greater knowledge or networking or a different company. But here's what I could guarantee you, that if you went out and did the key practices that would lead to success in your life, in time, you will know a greater degree of success because success is a byproduct. Same with wealth. We'd have to look at how you're spending money and if you're saving money and what you're doing with the money that you're saving. And I could tell you, go and practice these essential priorities of wealth building, and in time, you will be wealthier. The same is true with happiness. Happiness is a byproduct of a certain set of principles, priorities, and practices that we do over time. And in time, we reap a garden, we reap a harvest of greater happiness in our life because we're doing the things that lead to happiness. Does that make sense? Folks, when we just expect happiness to happen in our marriage, when we just expect that happiness should be a given in our home, when we're surprised that we're not always happy, when we just expect it to happen, it will never happen. It is the result. It is the return on a certain set of investments that we make. There are some key principles that must be honored in order to enjoy a happy home. If you ignore those principles, happiness will not be possible. There's some key priorities that you must honor consistently, and there are some essential habits that we must do again and again and again if we hope to know happiness at all in our life, certainly within a home. Does that make sense? So here's the most important thing you have to understand. Happy is a byproduct of consistently honoring the essential practices of a healthy life. And as your pastor and as your friend, I'm going to tell you 3 things that you must understand. The first is, it's not easy. It's not easy. Is fitness easy? Like when you're terribly out of shape and you make that New Year's resolution like I'm going to lose 30 pounds and I'm going to, run a 5K. Is that easy? No, that's a lot of hard work. And there's all sorts of reasons why it's going to be harder than usual for you because you're just getting started, and there'll be a million rationales and a million excuses. It'll be too hot, too cold, too rainy, too windy, too early, too late, too sore, and you'll talk yourself. It takes a lot of hard work to get fit. Is it easy digging yourself out of an enormous amount of debt and starting to build wealth? It is not easy. So we have to understand that about happiness. The work that creates happiness is not always easy. The second thing, it will not happen quickly. It will not happen quickly. You don't become a success overnight, typically. You don't become wealthy overnight because money doesn't grow on trees. Fitness doesn't come easily, and it doesn't happen quickly. You will work at it for months and months, sometimes years, just to lose that 15 pounds that you set out to lose. It doesn't happen quickly, and neither does happiness. It is a marathon. It takes a long time to develop the essential practices that end up planting the seeds that become the harvest of happiness. And number 3, it requires consistency. It requires consistently applying certain disciplines day after day after day, week after week after week after month after year. But here's what I see and happened in so many homes. Parents will come and they'll sit through a series like Orange and they'll kind of get, okay, the preacher's got me all riled up, I'm ready to go, and then we'll do it for about 2 months. And then we fall back into some of those harmful patterns that don't lead to happiness. And we go like that for 2 and 3 and 5 years, and then there's crisis, and our kid starts turning 13 and acting like they're 13, and now we got a new crisis, and then we run back and we go, oh, we need to start doing the right things again. And no, you have to do them consistently. We have some good friends. Charlotte and I have some very dear friends. They have children the exact same age as my two, 23 and 18. And then they had a little extra gift 10 years later, all right? And so when they had their third child, they made a very critical decision that I applaud them for it. They said, no video games. Now, you have to understand how difficult that is in a contemporary society where every other kid's playing video games. You have to understand how difficult that is in a society where video games often become the substitute babysitter to keep a child out of mom and dad's hair. So they were making an enormous commitment, no video games. So when he's hanging around with all of his friends and all of his friends are playing their video games or talking about their video games, he can't be in that conversation. He doesn't know how to do that. But the returns on a very consistent application of an important discipline has paid off enormously in their life, because I know what they're doing with that little boy, and I know what that little boy's becoming like, and it's awesome. Now, that's not to say anything about kids that play video games. I'm just saying it was a real challenge for them as parents to toe that line. But they've had to do it consistently so they don't confuse him and end up creating patterns in his life that then they're just fight back and forth over. Does that make sense? So I want to just level the expectations here. We all want a happy home. What we need to understand is it will not be easy. It takes a lot of work. It's not going to happen overnight. It happens over the long run, and it does require consistency. In fact, as I do some life coaching. I serve clients who are trying to pursue certain ambitions in their life. A lot of them come in and they talk about, I just want to be happier, and I want that for them. But what I've learned is I'm not sure I'm a big fan of the word happy, because it has a certain persona about it that portrays happy as always smiling, always laughing, everything going well all the time. There's no drama, there's no problems. That's what it means to be happy, and that's not the truth. It's not the truth at all, and it's certainly not reality. So I try to get my clients to understand a different word than happy. I think it's a better word, and it's the word healthy. Let's talk about living a healthy life. A healthy life, not just physically, but in all of the arenas of our life, because that's more sustainable and that's a lot more realistic. Because in a healthy home, there can be conflict, there can be arguments, there can be drama. But in a healthy home, we have healthy patterns about how to resolve the conflict and how to address the tension. Where if we live in a happy home, then the conflict and the tension and the drama is so disturbing and disorienting, we don't always react properly, and we get so bugged out that, we're not a happy family because there's this happening. No, that happens in happy families. It's about how we deal with it. Can we deal with it in a healthy fashion? So here's what I want to say to you. A healthy home is a happy home. What we're really striving for is a healthy family. And just pick the categories. Healthy relationships. What does a relationship look like between a husband and wife when it's healthy? What does a relationship look like between a dad and a teenager when it's healthy? What is a relationship? This is important, and I'm not trying to be snarky, but this is such a critical factor in so many families. What does a relationship look like between a mother and her children that's healthy? That's a very interesting discussion. Healthy routines, healthy boundaries, healthy habits, healthy lines of authority. Like, who really is in charge, and what does that mean to be in charge, and how are decisions made? Healthy influences, television, social media. Healthy finances, a huge factor in a happy home. Two parents living under the enormous stress of debt, not being able to make ends meet, ends up creating a toxic environment, and the kids end up being the recipient of it. Healthy lifestyles, healthy faith. This, I think, is the more important discussion, is how do we create a healthy home, because a healthy home is always a happy home. Does that make sense? So here's the question I have for us. Are you willing to do what it takes to have a happy home as badly as you want a happy home? Do what it takes. That's what the proverb was teaching us. You don't just have a healthy garden without doing the hard work of the gardening. So we need to understand that happy doesn't just happen. It takes work. It doesn't happen overnight, and it requires an enormous amount of consistency. So then let's talk about this second topic, the 4 most important building blocks to a happy home. You ready? You still with me? You don't look like you're still with me. You still with me? Okay, so here's the deal. This is a discussion we have to have. It's not particularly sexy. It's just essential. Here's what I'm going to tell you. If you ignore these 4 things that we're about to talk about, you will never have a happy home. They're non-negotiable. They're absolutely inflexible. You can try, and certainly we live in a culture that is trying really hard to ignore these 4 principles. But if you ignore these 4 principles, happiness in your home will always be elusive. You interested? Here's the 4 words. I'll show them to you, and then we're going to explore each of them. You have to understand something about design. You have to understand something about wisdom, something about discipline, and this is the other discipline. This isn't about correction. This is about consistent application of the right things, and then you have to understand something about humility. These are non-negotiable. Ignore them, dismiss them, demean them, and happiness will always be elusive in your home. Let's talk about the first one, design. Design is about honoring the way that God ordained life to work. So it's interesting. This will be free. I'm not going to charge you for this. It's interesting. If you read through your Bible, if you study Genesis to Revelation, what you're going to see is that God ordained 5 institutions for divine purposes, and he established each of them as carrying blessing. So what does that mean? God created 5 institutions or entities that had a particular purpose in the way that human life was to work. And anybody who lived in honor of that particular design, they would know blessing. Does that make sense? Okay, so here they are. Israel, government, work, family, and church. God established and identified the nation of Israel, that they had a divine role in the world. He was going to use them for his divine purposes. And as long as the nation of Israel honored the design that he had for them, they would know blessing. In fact, you listening? It says specifically in the Bible that any other nation that honors the nation of Israel in their divine place of God's role in the universe, that they too will inherit blessing, because the blessing is wrapped up in the design. Second, God established government. Don't think about contemporary politics. God was establishing that leadership among people groups was one of his divine ways of providing direction and protection. And as long as we live in a government that honors God's design, we will enjoy blessing. That government will be a blessing. And we look all across the landscape, America included, and the more that we do government without God's design or apart from God's design, then we inherit not blessing, but the issues and the problems that come with it. God established work for divine purposes, and those of us who honor divine purposes for work, we will know the blessing that comes with it. But the 2 that I'm most interested in is that God Okay, you listening? God ordained and established the family as the fundamental unit of society. He ordained it for divine purposes in our world, and he granted it the power of blessing. Those of us who live in God's design of family will know his blessing. Now, I don't have to tell you guys because you read the news, you follow social media. We live in a contemporary society that is doing everything it can. It's working overtime right now to redefine God's design for family. Redefine the idea of partnership, marriage, gender, the whole thing. Full bore attack to redefine family. And I'm just going to tell you, it's never going to work. It'll never bring the depth of happiness because it does not fit the design that God established, and God's design is non-negotiable. He's not looking for popularity. And then, lastly, God established the church to have a divine purpose in the world. And those of us who live in relationship to the design, we enjoy blessing that comes with it. So, here's an important thing that I want us to get. That as we honor God's design for family and God's design for church, we position ourselves for blessing. And do you know what the root meaning of the word blessing is? Would you like to? It means happy. The root word from which we get the idea of blessing is to be happy. God is saying, if you honor the design of the way that I created the family to work and the church to work, you will know a level of happiness that is unparalleled with anything else the world's going to provide for you. Okay, you ready? You ready? You ready to be stretched? Okay, this might be hard for some of us, especially if we're Texan. If you're Texan, this is always really hard. Okay? Here's the deal. In all of these, there's a principle. Remember I was talking about principles, priorities, and practices? There's a principle. We see it all through the scriptures. You ready? It's called the authority submission principle. And us Texans, we go, I don't do submission very well. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Nobody? Nobody's going to tell you what to do? You see, if that attitude is true reflection of our heart, then we can never submit to God. And God has established that the family and marriage was designed to work a certain way. And if we will ignore what he offers, we'll never know the blessing. You see, the authority submission principle, what God has established as an authority when we submit ourselves to it, it's good for us. It's actually all about faith. Will I trust God enough that he knows things that I don't understand about his design of the family and his design for the church? Because when we refuse to submit to the authority of these institutions that God has ordained, we're saying, God, I can do it better than you. I got this figured out. And God's standing up there. We'd like to think he's like, okay, but he's not. He's a heavenly Father. And he goes, okay, Paul, have at it. Try it. But you just need to know it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Here's just an example. Ephesians chapter 5. Read verses 22 through verse 33. Kind of get the whole picture. But look at this. Each one of you, he's talking about marriage. Each one of you must love his wife as he loves himself. The time, the energy that we give to ourselves, must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. I'm not going to respect him. Do you know what he's done? Yes, I understand what he's done. But the design is there must be a prevailing love and a prevailing environment of respect in the home, or it will not work. It's the design. Does this make sense? We talk about this all day, but we don't have time because you're not going to give me all day, all right? Look at this. The next one is wisdom. Wisdom, what is it? Applying the lessons you learn to the choices you make. That's what Proverbs 24 was about. Lessons learned to the choices that you make. So interesting as a pastor. Sometimes I get into some very interesting discussions. Somebody comes to me and they're asking for some help. They're asking for some guidance. They've got themselves all tied up in some knots, and they're trying to get their way out. And they're asking me some advice, and I'll say, well, here's what I tell you. Here's what I think you should do. And I'll suggest 3 or 4 things. And sometimes they cop an attitude on me, and here's what they'll say. They'll say, well, can you give me a chapter and a verse? And I'll say, chapter and a verse for what? For those things you just told me to do. And I'll say, no, I can't give you a chapter and a verse for that. They'll say, well, if it's not a chapter and a verse, then I don't have to do it because it's not in the Bible. Okay. Let me ask you a couple questions. Would you ever put marbles down your garbage disposal? No. That would ruin the whole garbage disposal. How about this one? Would you ever pour maple syrup in the oil reservoir in your BMW? No, it would ruin the engine. Would you ever eat rat pellets as a snack? No. Why? Because it would kill you. I go, you know what? Not a single verse or chapter in the Bible tells you that. That's called wisdom. What I'm suggesting to you about your alcoholism, about your pornography addiction, about your unfaithfulness to your spouse, what I'm suggesting to you about the issues that are between you and your child, it isn't a chapter and a verse. It's called wisdom. And wise people practice wisdom. Here's what I'm trying to let you understand. In the search for a happy home, in the course of 18 years with your child, you are going to run into absolutely a million different scenarios that will change by the day, by the hour, by their age, and you will never be able to find enough chapters and verses in the Bible to teach you what to do with each of those situations. That's why we must acquire wisdom. We must learn lessons from other people who have made mistakes, from our own mistakes, but most of all, we must learn wisdom from the scriptures in order to know how to apply those principles to the situations that we're facing with our teenagers. Look at this passage. Very first verses of the opening chapter of Proverbs. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, the king of Israel. And what are they for? They're for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair. That's the objective, for giving prudence to those who are simple or ignorant, knowledge and discretion to the young, the inexperienced. Let the wise listen. Let them add to their learning. Let them discern. Let the discerning get guidance for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings of the riddles of the wise. And here's the first most important proverb. The fear, the deep and profound respect for the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. But people who are ignorant and people who are lazy and people who are stubborn and rebellious, they despise wisdom and they act like they know it all at the expense of a happy marriage and a happy home. We could talk about wisdom for a month. Third one, discipline. I'm not talking about punishment. I'm talking about the consistent honoring of healthy habits. We have to understand what are the most important priorities and practices that lead to a happy home, and then we must hold the line. Regardless of how our children react, regardless of the distribution of time that we have available, we have to be consistent. Charlotte and I, we established early in our marriage when our boys were born that we would have this consistent discipline in our home. And it has paid huge dividends for us. And the habit was that we would always sit down together in the evening for meals. And when we sat down to have dinner together as a family, no cell phones, You couldn't check a text message. If it beeped or dinged or vibrated, you couldn't. We had to be there. Now, were there exceptions? Sure, particularly as the boys got busier with things at school, but that was the rare exception. You and I and us, we will be home for dinner together. And it was a consistent practice, and I believe that it's paid off enormous dividends for us. There'll be 100 other ones that you'll have to decide which ones are the most important. And then finally, there has to be an attitude of humility in a home. There has to be. This idea that I don't know it all and I don't have it all figured out, and this is a new situation. I've never been here before. So come to it with an attitude of, I want to learn more, I want to accept help, and I'm willing to extend grace to my kids because they don't always have it figured out either, and they don't always get it right either. But when we take some sort of an arrogant, stubborn, inflexible, dogmatic, or dictatorial sort of role in our home, and it's not gracious, we are ruining our chances of happiness. Let me just make this one side note, and then we'll move on because we're running out of time. If you're sitting here today and you know that there's issues in your home that need to be fixed in order for it to be happier, but you're refusing to go get help from a licensed, experienced counselor, that's arrogance that keeps you from doing that. That's arrogance that's saying, nobody is going to be able to teach me any different. I don't need any help. I'll do this on my own way. And I'm saying to you, that kind of attitude is ruining the chances of your home being as happy as it can be. Get the help that you need to figure out the destructive, dysfunctional patterns that continue to work against the happiness of your home. Get that help, figure that out so that the entire 18 years that you have with your kids isn't ruined by your own stubbornness. Okay? So let me offer you 4 things that you can begin working on today that I think are absolutely indispensable to a happy home. You ready? Now you'd think, well, you're the preacher, you're going to say this. Okay? Maybe. Then I'm the preacher and I'm going to say this. A healthy reverence for God and a deep devotion to Jesus Christ is absolutely key to happiness in your home. You know why? You know why? Anybody interested? Because if God has established a design for the way that marriage is to work, if God has established a design for how family was to work, then I think it would be incredibly wise for us to know the designer, to honor the designer, to give the designer a place in our life and honor him for who he is. Look at this passage of Scripture, Psalm 127. In fact, it's a psalm. This is the only verse in it. There isn't verses 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's just one verse. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders, the parents, they labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the house, the city, the guard stands watch in vain. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Fools don't include God in the picture, and they pay for it when their house is overrun by unhappiness and drama and discontentment and rebellion and brokenness. So let me say this. I say this to all of you, but I'm going to draw on 30 years of pastoral experience, and I'll say, men, listen to me. You have to make a choice about just how seriously you're going to take your faith. A casual faith never produces serious results. I believe it's long time overdue for men to step up. Be the loving servant leader that God designed you to be from a deep and abiding understanding of who God is and who Jesus Christ is to you. I'll just say this. Dabbling around with your faith every once in a while isn't helping your family one bit, and especially not helping your children. You are confusing them. You are creating a duplicity in their life. They are learning something from you about how serious to take God and what will happen when they start turning 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18, and certainly when they go off to college. They're going to make this premise in their life, whether you like it or not. No matter how much permission you gave them or not, they're going to say, well, my dad never went to church. My dad didn't seem to take any of this stuff too seriously, so I'm not going to take it seriously either. And you have just established a pattern in their life that will reap consequences for years and years to come. It's time for us parents to step up to the challenge of our faith in Jesus Christ. It won't be easy, it won't happen quickly, and it requires consistency. But the returns are out of this world. A healthy relationship between mom and dad. It's an absolutely essential key to a healthy marriage. To a healthy family. The single most important factor to a happy home is a father and a mother with a healthy marriage. Keep neglecting your marriage, you can't expect that your home's going to be happy. Get the help that you need. Number 3, a healthy approach to conflict resolution. We have to learn how to do this without yelling and screaming and belittling and powering up and manipulating and controlling. We have to figure out how do we resolve conflicts between husbands and wives and between parents and children. Learn those habits and then honor them consistently. And then finally, the last one, a healthy priority for time together. Folks, listen to me. We have to stop letting our children determine the priority of spending time together. If they don't want it, if they don't like the choices, or they got so many other things that keep us from spending time together, it's time for mom and dad to decide what is wisest and best for their family and insist that there are ample opportunities throughout a week and a month for us to all be together in the same place, enjoying similar experiences so that we know connection. Make sense? It's a lot to think about. I feel like I've been driving backwards. Beep, beep, beep. I just unloaded the bed and I just dumped a whole bunch of stuff on you. It's a lot to think about. If you want, you can watch the message again. It'll be available online. Here's what we want to do with the last few moments. I want us to just have a time, kind of reflect. I'm going to ask our band to join me on the stage. Just use this song, just these couple of minutes, orient your soul around something that we talked about this morning, maybe something that stood out and God's saying, I need you to think about this. Well, let's not just run off. Let's just sit here for a moment. Let's think about something that God said to you today about what needs to change. Let me pray for you. Our Father in heaven, we all want to be happy, and we certainly want a happy home. And you've given us the privilege and the responsibility of being the gardeners. The question is, what kind of gardener will we be? God, we need your help. As parents, as husbands and wives, we need to be on our faces begging for your help. Not as some way to earn spiritual points, but because we so desperately need your guidance, your wisdom, your help. Speak to us in these few moments that we have together. I pray and ask in Christ's name.
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Just sing that again. And came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Jesus, yours is the victory. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living church. Let's give your God praise this morning. Well, we're so glad you guys were here. Thank you so much for worshiping with us this morning. We'll see you guys next time.